types of information that we track and things that we provide to both the OEM, OE supplier, and aftermarket community. But what I want to touch on is, like I said, is the type of data that we gather and analyze that's behind the insights and trends we're going to talk about. So in general, we track, at a summary level, about 3 different types of information. We track vehicle registrations. So we get the registration information from governments in the United States, of course. We get it from the States, but we get it from governments all around the world. So we get, anytime you register a vehicle, a new vehicle, a used vehicle purchase, any title changes, anytime you change an address, we're getting those records every day, every week, every month, and collecting those and compiling those as part of one data set that we have. We also get new sales information. So we know what new vehicles are being sold or new registrations every year, again, around the world. We're getting that through our relationships with the OEMs. We also get it from various associations around the world. So we're collecting what vehicles are selling, import-export info, things like that, so we can track vehicles, again, around the world. And finally, through our relationships with every truck and car OEM, we get the VIN information, all the VIN specifications. So when we get a VIN as part of a registration record or a sales record, we can decode that VIN into year, make, model, engine, body style type details, anything we can decode from that VIN. And then we have that data and that information over decades, if you will. And that is what drives and allows us to pull out the insights and the trends that we see that we think are important for our customers to be aware of in order to succeed going forward. So that gives you a little background as to the type of data and information behind what you're going to see today. So before we dive into the trends, like I said, I want to provide some business context, if you will, within which the trends are happening. And we'll start with a look at kind of a real high level industry outlook for over the next 5 or 6 years, what direction the aftermarket is headed, and then we'll get in and examine vehicle miles traveled, like I said. These next couple of slides I'm borrowing from Jay Burkhardt at AASA, something he shared in a webinar not too long ago that I thought was interesting, and I think it provides some good context. As you can see, the U.S. aftermarket, and it depends how you measure it, but it's about a $250 billion industry, and it's been growing over the past 6 or 7 years since the recession, as you can see, and it's expected to continue to grow over the next 4 or 5 years at a rate of a little bit more than 3.5% per year. So the outlook is good, relatively healthy, but there's some interesting things happening behind that growth that I wanted to take a look at and share with everyone. And one of the drivers of the growth over it's been over the past decade or so, and will be going out into the future, has been the adoption of new technology, more expensive technology, if you will. And there's some examples on the screen there. You can see on the left the wiper blades when the market is transitioning from traditional wiper blades in the past to the low profile style wiper blades. You can see the difference in the pricing there. That's 3 or 4 times as much. In the middle, you look at the fuel pumps, where the industry has gone from, say, an electric in-tank fuel pump to the full in-tank assemblies and modules that are sold today. And that price differential is about 5 times as much. And then on the right side of the screen, you can see the wheel end, gone from the old traditional cup and cone, wheel bearing replacement, if you will, to now we're selling full hub assemblies. And some of these are even including some electronics, some sensors and things like that. And that repair, that cost is 10 or 15 times perhaps what it was. And the key thought here, and why I share this, is that if much of the growth is being driven by the cost of the components increasing and not just repair opportunities, if you will, increasing repair opportunities, then for anyone to get share gains, we really need to be taking it from others, from each other. And I would argue that understanding the trends and knowing what's happening with the VIO and the fleet and the mix of vehicles and things like that on the road will help people do that, and why I think looking at these trends is so important. All right, now let's take a look at vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, and some people call it vehicle miles driven, but it's really the same thing. There's some interesting things happening here, so let's take a look. What you're looking at here is the total U.S. volume of VMT over the past 25 years or so. And a big macro picture, it's a really good picture. It's about a 50% increase over this time period. But obviously the problem started in 2007, right after the recession. We saw our first sustained flattening or decline since the late 70s in vehicle miles traveled. Now, that decline back in the 70s lasted about 30 months. This one lasted 6 years. But as you can see, the last couple of years have begun a real positive trend. In fact, 2014 was the first year VMT broke 3 trillion miles since it peaked back before the recession in 2007. And in 2015, we actually set an all-time record for VMT at about 3.1 trillion miles. And kind of jumps out at you when you look at it this way. This is kind of almost the same time period. This is looking at year-over-year changes in vehicle miles traveled, if you will. Anything green above the line, that's a good thing. That's an increase. Anything red below the line, that's bad. That's a decline in VMT. And as you can see there, we've just come off after 3 out of 4 years with pretty significant declines. We've just come off of 4 straight years of increases. 2012 up a little under 0.5%. 2013 up a little over 0.5%. You can see the increases in 14 and 15 that I talked about. And that increase in 2015 was as big or bigger than most of the biggest increases we've seen over the last 25 years or so. So very significant increases in VMT. And so far this year, 2016 year-to-date is tracking a little bit behind that, but still a pretty healthy year-to-date increase. And that's September year-to-date at 3.1%. Now, many of you may kind of figure out what's going on here. And obviously, there's a very good correlation between vehicle miles traveled and gas prices. And gas prices are certainly very favorable, have been very favorable to VMT over the last couple years. And as you can see here, this is 36-month average of regular gas. The national average for a gallon of regular as of November 8th was $2.20 a gallon. And that keeps us basically flat to where it was in 2015. However, when you look back a couple of years, it's down about 41% since mid-2014. So obviously having a very major positive impact on vehicle miles traveled in the U.S. And we don't see gas prices getting back to the levels that you see back in 2014, certainly not in the next year or so. So for now and into the near future, very good positive outlook for vehicle miles traveled, and then we'll just have to keep an eye on the gas prices and other economic factors as we go forward. But for now, a very good trend in vehicle miles traveled. I want to take a quick look at what's going on around the world. Also, a good trend in vehicle miles traveled globally. Here you're looking at total global vehicle miles traveled from 2000 out to 2021. Tremendous growth expected globally. But as you can see, you can see that flattening that I talked about and the impact that it had on global light vehicle miles traveled. But obviously with the U.S. taking off and other markets increasing, we're seeing a very good trend on global vehicle miles traveled as well. And obviously China will be a big part of that growth. And in fact, between 2010 and 2021, China will actually be kind of catching up to U.S. levels. You can see there that China is about 20% of the U.S. vehicle miles traveled back in 2010, if you will. And by 2021, they'll be at about 50% of the U.S. vehicle miles traveled. So the VMT in China is going to grow by about 200% over this time period. So obviously, it's not just the U.S. trend. We've seen huge growth in China. I don't think that surprises anybody. Also, growth in places like India. They're also going to grow by about the same 200%. So again, just very good growth in vehicle miles traveled, not just in the U.S., but around the world. So very good global trend for our aftermarket business. So with that, let's go ahead and get into the trends. And these are not necessarily the big mega trends, if you will, that you might hear about, that some people talk about. These are simply key things that we see in the data that we track every day, every week, every month, every year, and we have decades of this information. And these are just things that we see that we feel are important for the aftermarket to be aware of and to be reacting to in order to be successful going forward. I just want to make one quick note. As I get into some of this, I will be talking about domestics and imports. I just wanted to make a note that when I'm talking domestic and imports as we go forward, I'm simply defining it by headquarter location. Nothing fancy about country of origin or where the vehicle is manufactured. So in this case, when we say domestics, we're really talking about the Detroit three, the big three, if you will. And I have Chrysler in domestics and Fiat in European imports. So just wanted to make that clear about how I'm defining domestic versus imports. So with that, let's get into trend number one. U.S. light vehicle sales set a record last year, but we're beginning to see sales level off. And obviously, everybody's aware of the great story of the U.S. auto industry with a huge comeback in light vehicle sales, kind of leading the U.S. out of the recession, if you will. But we are beginning to see that number begin to slow, and I'll talk about that in a second. But keep in mind, it's all relative. When I say we're beginning to level off, we're leveling off at about a record number, if you will. So let's take a look. In 2015, light vehicle sales in the U.S. hit 17.5 million units. The first time we broke 17 million units since about 2001. And not only was that the first time we broke that mark in about 15 years, it was also a record, like I said. It was an all-time record for U.S. light vehicle sales in the U.S. So huge year for the automotive industry. Now we are seeing a slight decline. We are forecasting a slight decline this year. We just actually adjusted our forecast over the last couple of months to about 17.4 million units. And we actually brought that down about 300,000 units from the very beginning of the year. Now, much of this drop is being driven by a major fall off in car sales. Cars are actually down about 8.2% year to date through September, while light trucks are up 7.7%. So cars down about 8%, but light trucks up about almost 8%. That's a 15% swing between cars and light trucks. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but much of this is being driven by the crossover or small SUV segment. And again, we'll talk about that in a few slides here. And also just to note, in this down year, imports are actually up 1%. So it's domestics that are really taking the hit. They're down about 2%. So imports up in a down year. And again, we'll dive into a little more detail on imports and domestics. But overall, we are seeing a slight decline this year before bouncing back in 2017 to about that 17.5 million unit level. So again, even with bringing down the forecast, even with that slight decline this year and kind of beginning to flatten out, 17.5, 17.4 this year, 17.5 next year, like I said at the beginning, we're leveling off to right around record levels. And again, some people think that strong new vehicle sales is not necessarily a good thing for the aftermarket, but I don't always look at it that way. I think we win either way. I think anytime you're adding vehicles to the fleet, more cars and light trucks to the fleet, that's a good thing for the aftermarket. It's simply more cars and light trucks for us to repair going forward. Now you're looking at U.S. light vehicle sales over time, back to 2000. Anything in a gray bar, that's an actual number. Red there is last year, 2015, and then the green bars are our forecasts that I just kind of talked through. You can see 2015, that record year at 17.5 million units, and then dipping down this year, but peaking again in 2017. But the one thing I wanted to point out here are two things. One, you can see that big chunk out of the middle there. That's when the market lost about 40% of new light vehicle sales before we've had this great recovery. Keep that in mind. It's going to come into play and be important again when we talk about average age down the line here in a little bit. But one of the things I wanted to point out, you can see there, we've just come off 6 straight years of positive year-over-year growth. And 3 of those years have been double-digit increases. Now, the last time we saw 5 or 6 straight years of year-over-year growth was about 100 years ago. It was back in the 1920s. So just pointing out a great recovery and a great story for the U.S. auto industry. This is showing the same type of numbers, just in a different way. And there's a couple things I wanted to point out. Again, you're looking at U.S. light vehicle sales. Our forecast, this time it's out to 2023, and this actually goes back all the way to 1967. And there's a couple of things I wanted to point out. One is down here in the bottom right, you can see what I was talking about, the cars and light trucks. The light trucks are in gray, the cars are in blue, and you can see here that the increase in light trucks and this decline that we're seeing in cars. And we are seeing cars beginning to flatten out. Trucks actually growing a little bit for the next year or two, and then it too will begin to flatten out. But again, flattening out is pretty relative at a pretty high record level over the past years, and cars are getting hit as an inverse of that, of course. The other thing I wanted to point out is this trend. Pre-crash, we had about a 40-year trend that we were adding about 140,000 units a year of new vehicle units per year. And obviously, this drop-off, like we said, this 40% drop-off, and now we're beginning to flatten out and adjust again. And what we think is happening, or will happen, or have a very good chance of happening, is that we will go back to this trend. It'll just be adjusted down. And we'll see another trend begin to develop, just down a little ways from where it would have been had that trend continued the way it was, but still trending up eventually at about that 140,000 units per year. All right, now we're looking at light vehicle sales, and I've broken it up by domestics and imports. Imports in green, domestics in red. And a couple things I just wanted to point out here. First, you can see in 2016, the imports going up, domestics coming down, like I said. Another key year was 2008, when we first sold more imports than domestics in one year, about 650,000 units of imports sold more than domestics. But the real interesting thing are the two ends of the graph, if you will. When you look back in the year 2000, there were 5.5 million more domestic units sold than imports. In 2021, we'll be selling almost 2.5 million units more of imports than domestics. Together, that is about an 8 million unit per year swing toward import vehicles. So big shift toward the import nameplates. On the global side, we're seeing the same thing. Light vehicle sales will be nearly 90 million units in 2016, and we're going to break about 100 million units by 2021. By about 2026, we'll be at about 110 million units. Now, this 2021 number will represent about a 60% increase since the global recession, but this new demand is not going to be driven from the traditional markets that we've seen in the past. It's really going to be driven by China and emerging markets. You can see the mature markets, Japan, North America, and Europe, Western Europe in blue, China in red. And as you can see, the mature markets are going to level off and be about 40% of the demand. The rest of the world, of course, will then be 60%, but China itself will be half of that. There'll be 30% of that global demand of light vehicle sales. Seeing the same thing happening in total VIO. Total VIO is growing about 10%, actually a little bit more than 10% over the next 6 or 7 years. We're at about 264 million vehicles now in 2016. We'll be approaching 291 million vehicles by 2021. You can see our VIO forecast, just like I showed you with light vehicle sales a few minutes ago, and as you can see, that 2.4% increase by 2021. And again, just a great trend for the aftermarket, simply more cars and light trucks on the road than ever before, waiting for us to repair. Same thing happening globally. We see the global VIO increasing by nearly 30% over the next 6 or 7 years. We'll be at about 1.4 billion vehicles by 2021. You can see there 2 billion vehicles by 2040. And what's really interesting there is it took the auto industry about 100 years to get to the first billion in 2010. We're going to add another billion in just 30 years. All right, that brings us to trend number 2. As consumers flock back to the dealerships and drive these new vehicle sales, changing consumer preferences are quickly impacting the vehicle mix, the types of vehicles that we see coming into our repair bays, and that'll be driving different repair opportunities as we go forward. So let's take a look at what's happening there. We track about 30 different vehicle segments for the OEMs, and out of those 30, there's about 4 that are really emerging as dominant, and you can see them there on the screen. These 4 segments represent nearly 60% of all new U.S. vehicle registrations last year. compact CUVs, traditional compacts, traditional midsize, and full-size pickups. And you can see the percentages there. And what's interesting is these same four have represented about 60% over the last couple of years. But within these segments, we've seen a huge shift toward that compact CUV body style. This number 2 years ago was under about 14%, under 14%. These were both up around 17%. Trucks, light trucks, these full-size pickup trucks have always remained right around 12.5%, but a huge shift toward these compact CUVs. And when you add in the fifth largest segment, which is the mid-size CUV, those two together represent about 25% of all new light vehicle sales, the compact and mid-size CUVs. And combined, these five segments represent 65% of new light vehicle sales. Now look what's happening this year. Year to date, we're seeing in 2016, compact CUVs now almost 19% by themselves. And when you look at the traditional compacts and midsize, the cars, if you will, you can see them declining pretty significantly. And again, we talked about that, what was happening with new vehicle sales. Now, one of the other impacts on this is, think about, is not just the cars going to CUVs, is the different types of vehicles, like the convertibles and the two-door coupes and things. These were all based on the car platform, if you will. And as those cars decline and people are moving to the CUVs and small SUVs, we're not going to see as many convertibles and two-door coupes as we have in the past as well. Same thing happening globally. You can see the vehicle mix of light vehicle sales around the world, broken up between cars, pickups, and you can see it there across the bottom. Cars in 2000 represented over 60% of global new light vehicle sales. By 2021, they're going to be down to around 45%. And again, it's the CUV and SUV body styles that are taking over all that market share. Most of the others are remaining relatively flat, as you can see. So let's break out those CUVs and SUVs globally. And as you can see, it's really the CUV that's, like I said, that's driving the growth in this segment. CUVs will be about 90% of that segment by 2021. In fact, today they're already about 85%. And you can see some of the types of vehicles that I'm talking about there. Much of this growth is being driven by the smaller CUVs, like the Honda CR-V, the Ford Escape, the Toyota RAV4, but also the mid-size things like the Ford Edge. So same thing happening around the world that we see in the U.S. Now, what's happening here? We can correlate this back to a growth also in these smaller four-cylinder engines. They're smaller engines, four-cylinder engines, but most of these have more power. They're being turbocharged. They're adding new technology, and what the consumer is able to do is take these smaller engines, put it in a little bit bigger vehicle, in these smaller CUVs and SUVs, get the power that they want, but not have to give up the fuel efficiency that they're looking for as well. And we're seeing a real explosion in these smaller engines. And in the U.S., you can see back in 2008, it was 41% of all new light vehicle sales. 2015, they represented 56% market share, four-cylinder engines. And that 56% is tracking year to date as well. Same thing happening globally. On the left, you can see the global, this is production, engine production by displacement. Today, about 57% of engines are 2 liters or less. By 2025, 65% of all powertrains manufactured will be 2 liters or less. And you can see the cylinder count as well on the right side of the slide. Today, about 80 million vehicles produced are engines with less than 4 cylinders. That's about 88% of production. By 2025, it'll be over 90% of production. And we think this more powerful, smaller engine is what's helping to drive the CUV and the SUV, because they can take these, put them in a little bit larger vehicle, and like I said, not have to give up horsepower, but also getting fuel efficiency. All right, now let's switch and take a look at imports and domestics in the U.S. You're looking at share of U.S. new light vehicle sales. And in 2000, domestics represented 66% of all new vehicle sales. By 2015, today, virtually they're at 46%. And by 2021, imports are going to grow another 3 points or so and be nearly 60% of all new light vehicle sales in the U.S. Now, what's happening here? Obviously, people are moving toward import vehicles. I don't think that's a big surprise to anybody, but there's a number of things going on. And one of the things I wanted to point out is just the type of consumer that's driving this. You can see on the left there, the industry was up about 5%. And you can see the different ethnic consumers, African American, Asian, ethnic as a total, and Hispanic. And you can see each one of those groups is growing more than the industry overall, with Hispanic consumers growing at about 180% of the industry rate. And when you look at the types of vehicles that these ethnic consumers are selecting, you can see what part of what's happening in the move to imports. This is looking at Hispanic models in 2015, and just about every model there is an import. These are the favorite selections by these ethnic consumers. And other than the pickup trucks, every vehicle there is an import. So another reason why much of the market is moving toward import nameplates. Now, what's happening with the VIO? This is all having a very significant impact very quickly to the overall VIO. What you see there is every vertical bar is a snapshot of the VIO for that given year, and I've broken it out into 4 different segments: domestic car, light truck, domestic light truck, import car, and import light truck. And you can see the market shares in 2006. Now, over the last 10 years, domestic cars have dropped 10 share points. It's not a percent change. It's a loss in share points. Domestic light trucks down 2 share points. Import cars up 4 percentage points or share points. Import light trucks up 8. Now, those numbers may not seem real big. Oh, I guess the 10, I mean, that's kind of large. But in general, those numbers may not seem real big shifts. But when you're talking about a 260 some odd million unit fleet, these are some pretty big changes in the VIO over a relatively short amount of time. And it jumps out at you even more when you break out domestic cars and domestic light trucks separately. You see domestic cars in red, import cars in green over this time period. These are now actual percent changes, not share points, but percent changes. Domestic cars down 40% as a part of VIO, import cars up 50%. And 2010 was a very significant year. That's when, for the first time, there were more import cars on the road than domestics. Looking at light trucks, obviously the domestics have a much bigger advantage, but still an interesting trend. Domestic light trucks up about 17%, and again, a lot of that's driven because of the CUVs and small SUVs. We put those in the light truck categories. But look at import light trucks, up 3 times. Not 3%, but up. They've tripled their number as a part of the VIO, nearly tripled it as a part of the VIO since 2002. And when you combine everything together, cars and light trucks, again, you've got domestics down about 9%, 15 million units fewer. Imports up 118%, 76 million additional import units when you're looking at 2002 versus 2021. So huge trend, and obviously gives some real reasons behind why the import vehicle market is really doing well. Now, why is all this important? I think it's obviously important to be aware of what the OEMs are doing, what consumers are doing, what they are selling, what consumers are buying, because these are the vehicles that will be entering our repair bays in the years to come. That brings us to trend number 3. The aftermarket repair sweet spot is continuing to evolve as the U.S. vehicle fleet ages. Now, average age of the vehicle has increased for as long as anybody's been tracking it. Quality of that vehicle continues to improve. Vehicles are lasting longer. All of this is driving average age up. But we're seeing some real interesting things happening with average age and how that is impacting the overall fleet. And I want to share that with you. You can see the average age history over time, 2002 out to today in 2016. And as you can see today, we're at about 11.6, up a little bit from last year. But what I want you look at on this chart is take a look over here on the left side. You can see average age increasing, like I said, but it's a relatively small increases year over year, relatively flat. And then look, since the recession, huge acceleration in that average age increasing, and then beginning to flatten out again now. Back to kind of the traditional rate that we saw. Now, what's happening here? Well, obviously the market has felt that impact of that 40% drop that I was talking about in that slide I showed a little while ago. 40% drop in new vehicle registrations. There's simply, for a while there a lack of those 2008, 9, 10 model years out on the road. Fewer light vehicle sales, people hanging on to their vehicle longer, like we said, all driving the average age up and accelerating the increase of that average age over that time period. Now, it's not just the fewer light vehicle sales. We're actually seeing changes in consumer behavior as well. And what you're looking at here is the average length of ownership in the U.S. The blue line is for new buyers. The green line is used buyers, and the line in the middle there is combining those two numbers. And basically what you're seeing here is over, since just before the recession in 2006 to today in 2015, each of these numbers, each of these data points have increased by 2 years over this time period. People are hanging onto their vehicles that much longer, and that also is causing that average age to go up. People hanging onto the vehicle longer, the vehicle lasting longer, and all of that is causing the average age to accelerate over those years that I showed. And in fact, another element of this is when you look at vehicle loans, the fastest growing, not the largest segment, but the fastest growing vehicle loans are the 6, 7, 8 year auto loans. And all of this is increasing this average length of ownership that you're seeing here on the screen. So you can see the average age forecast that we see. It's at 11.6 now. We don't see it hitting 11.8 until about 2019. But more important than these actual numbers, I think, again, is the impact that it's having to the vehicles on the road. And let's take a look in the different age groupings. When you look between now and 2021, we see vehicles new to 5 years old growing by about 16%. Now that's pretty intuitive. We talked about light vehicle sales being at real high levels. That group of vehicles is going to grow. When you look at vehicles 6 to 11 years old, they are going to grow, but only by about 5%. Now it's better than what we looked at about a year ago or so. Those were actually declining by almost 11%. But that's still not a good thing for the aftermarket, because at 6 to 11-year-old vehicles, kind of what we consider the aftermarket sweet spot, or where most of our repairs come from. Now I know that changes depending on the products that you sell and things like that, but in general we're talking 6 to 11, 5 to 12, something like that is what manufacturers consider kind of the sweet spot where most of the repairs are coming from. So this doesn't look like a very good trend, but let's come back to that. But look at the right side of the slide. The oldest vehicles, 12 years and older, are going to grow by 10%. That's a great thing for the aftermarket because we get the most of those repairs. But let's come back to that middle slide. Again, a lot of people are talking about how that aftermarket sweet spot is shrinking. Fewer vehicles there going forward, and that is true. But I look at it kind of a different way. I think we need to be looking at that sweet spot differently. We've been defining it the same way for at least the 25, 30 years that I've been in the aftermarket, and we've got to be getting more of our repairs from these older vehicles. And to demonstrate that point, I also took a look at the oldest vehicles, 16 years and older. They're actually going to grow 30% over the next 5 or 6 years. So is the sweet spot really shrinking, or is it changing? Do we need to be thinking about it differently? So rather than just looking at percents, well, before we look at look at the average age impact on VIO units, rather than just percent changes. And what I've tracked here is over time, from back to 2002 out to 2021, the new to 5-year-old vehicles in red, the 6 to 11-year-old vehicles in blue, and the oldest vehicles 12 plus in green. And as you can see here, this fluctuations here are being driven by those lack of 2008, 9, 10 model year vehicles when new vehicle sales were so low. So we talked about the 0 to 5 that are going to climb over the next several years as the new vehicles are added, and yeah, the 6 to 11 are going to decline and then begin to grow, and it'll be about a 5% growth by 2021. But again, look at these oldest vehicles, huge growth in these older vehicles. And one thing that's interesting, many of you might be able to guess what's happening here at the end. That time frame in 2021 is when those 12 and older vehicles start including the 2008, 9, 10 model years. So you're going to see, again, those lack of those model years driving this number down and these 6 to 11 numbers up. But let's take a look at, again, at the units on the road and how the new to 5-year-old vehicles are comparing to the oldest vehicles. Like we said, new to 5-year-old vehicles are going to grow. 2002, new to 5-year-old vehicles represented 84 million units on the road. 2016, they now represent about 75 million units They did decline because, again, new light vehicle sales were down for several years there. However, by 2021, they are going to grow to about 88 million units. However, they're only going to grow back to about where they were in 2002. Now let's look at the oldest units, or the oldest vehicles. 2002, 16 years and older, 35 million units. Today, they represent 62 million units. In 2021, 16-year and older vehicles represent 81 million units. In fact, we'll have 20 million units that are 25 years and older by then. So I think, again, we've got to be getting more and more of our repairs from these older vehicles, and we need to be thinking about that sweet spot differently. Now, that is going to impact the consumer and perhaps the way we need to approach these repair opportunities. We'll be getting more and more repair opportunities from older vehicles. We'll be getting them from third, fourth vehicle owners. Now, this is just kind of one thought. There's obviously lots of different impacts the aftermarket needs to think through, but certainly it's going to be key to have kind of a good, better, best brand strategy, perhaps, in order to market to not only the first and second owner of a vehicle, but the third, fourth, maybe even the fifth owner of the vehicle. So huge impact to our aftermarket business, and something we think the aftermarket really needs to be aware of going forward. So finally, trend number 4. OEMs are rapidly adopting new technology and increasing the vehicle electrification to meet the current CAFE requirements. Now, over the past several years, I've been given these industry talks. I've discussed that it's going to be a while before battery electric vehicles are a large part of the fleet, and that is still largely true. And but I also believe it's important for the aftermarket to be prepared for what's coming, because the new technologies and the overall increasing electrification of the vehicle is happening now, well in advance of the battery vehicle or even the autonomous vehicle becoming a major part of the VIO in the fleet. And let's see what's going on with that. Obviously, the global CAFE standards, the global CO2 and fuel efficiency regulation, having a major impact on OEMs and the types of vehicles and powertrains that we're making. Right now, the standards stand at 54.5 miles per gallon by 2025. Well, prior to the election that just occurred, the standards were beginning to look, global standards were beginning to zero in on 86 miles per gallon by 2030. And that wasn't written in stone, that wasn't a regulation or law yet, but that's kind of where they were headed. But to reach these goals, every OEM needs to improve the fuel efficiency by about 5% per year. And that's going to dictate some changes in technology and powertrains, and we'll take a look at that. But for the talks today, for what I'm going to cover over the next couple of slides, we're going to focus in on 54.5 miles per gallon by 2025. First of all, let's look at engine program launches. At a time when new vehicle launches are really taking off, OEMs offering more vehicles, more and more choices and options for the consumer. On the engine side, they're actually almost stopping new engine development. From 2010 to 18, as you can see there, the average was about 62 new engine programs per year. Over the next, I don't know, 5 years or so, by 2023, that average between 2019 and 2023, that average is going to be about 26. So instead, OEMs are going to be focusing on revising current engines, adding new technology, and focusing in on the electrification of the vehicle. And when I talk about new technologies for the ICE, the internal combustion engine, what we're talking about is things like GDI, gasoline direct injection. We've already talked about turbochargers and how many of those are being added, stop-start capability, cylinder deactivation. At the bottom there, more efficient transmissions. We're seeing more and more speeds and different types of transmissions being added. Now, a couple of these technologies are really going to become dominant. As you can see there, by 2021, 50% of vehicles are going to have stop-start technology, up from about 16% today. And about 66% will have the gasoline direct injection technology, whether it be turbo or non-turbo. But these technological advancements are not just limited to the powertrain, like I said. I talked a little bit about transmissions. Here's a quick slide on transmission production. You're looking at global transmission production here, and you can see the new high-speed transmissions with 6, 7, 8 speeds or more, today in 2015 represent 86% of all vehicles produced have transmissions at 6 speeds or higher. By 2025, it'll be 94% will be these higher speeds, more speed transmissions. And it's not just the number of speeds. it's more efficient transmissions and new technology being added to transmissions. On the right side, you can see the different transmission types. You've got manual and auto, you got continuously variable transmission, electric variable transmission, dual clutch transmissions, all the different new transmission technology that are being introduced. And you can see here in 2005, about 95% of all vehicles simply had manual or automatic transmissions. By 2025, that number is going to be down to about 65%. And you can see the increasing share of all these different types of transmissions being added to the vehicle, all in an effort to go after those fuel efficiency regulations. So what we're seeing is some major compliance gaps, if you will. And what you can see here is that on U.S. passenger cars, you can see the OEMs are beginning to see a gap between actual fuel economy and what the CAFE targets are. Same thing happening with U.S. light trucks. And basically what that's saying is that the technologies that they're applying that we're talking about are not enough. And they're also going to be focusing in on things like lightweighting, electrification of the vehicle, and that's what I'm going to spend the rest of this talk on, is talking about the electrification of the vehicle and what's going on there as the OEMs move forward. And it's not just hybrids and battery vehicles and things like that. As you can see, they are going to be increasing in popularity. The consumers are beginning to buy in and drive up the market share, if you will, of these type vehicles, but it's going to be a while before they have a significant impact on the VIO. You can see the combination there of mild hybrids, full hybrids, plug-ins, and battery electric vehicles. By 2025, they'll represent about 18%. So the pace has accelerated, or will be accelerating as well. Today, about 500,000 of these units are sold per year. By 2021, it'll be about 2 million, and by 2025, it'll be up around 3 million vehicles. So it is accelerating, but it's going to be a while before there's a significant part of the VIO. But the key is that the technologies that are supporting these types of vehicles are arriving now, if you will. And let's take a look at some of that. What you're looking at here again is production, and North American production, and the shift to mild and full hybrids and the electrified vehicle. And you can see this blue portion of the slide are those vehicles that are internal combustion engine only, gas and diesel engines. And you can see that in about 2 years, the number will be only about 50% of engines produced in North America will simply be the ICE type engine. You're going to see stop-start really begin to take off, and then the battery and hybrids really beginning to take off at the beginning of the next decade. Now, stop-start is important because that requires electrification, whether it's the 48-volt type system or other type of vehicle electrification. So again, something the aftermarket needs to be preparing for. Same thing happening in Europe, just at a faster pace, if you will. You can see back in 2013-14, we already passed the 50% of just an ICE in produced units, and you can see a faster pace of the adoption of hybrids and battery type vehicles. Now, again, as we talked about electrification and new technology coming on pretty quickly, I want to spend the last few minutes talking about how this oncoming electrification of the vehicle, not just the new powertrains, not just hybrids and battery electric vehicles, but everything that's happening to the vehicle, everything the OEM is doing to bring that vehicle from a traditional ICE powertrain through the battery type vehicles all the way on to autonomous vehicles. And keeping in mind, it's not important about when the battery cars or autonomous vehicles are going to be a large part of the fleet. And I'll share a forecast in a minute, but again, the key is the technology is here, and the aftermarket needs to be ready. Now, this is a slide I'm borrowing from Malcolm Sismore, actually at Delphi, but I think it proves a point pretty significantly. A lot of times, the aftermarket, the automotive industry, gets a knock for not being kind of on the cutting edge of technology. But you can see these different industries, different types of software. Look at the F-35 fighter jet, runs on 24 million lines of code. Facebook takes 61 million lines of code to run. But on our vehicles today, on these premium type vehicles, they operate with 100 million lines of code. So this electrification, this new generation vehicle are on the road today, and something the aftermarket needs to be ready to repair. And all of this is supporting these new ADAS systems, these advanced driver assistance systems. More ECMs, more sensors, more cameras around the vehicle. It all takes computers and electronics to run as we move from a full driver control vehicle through a driver-assisted vehicle on our way to a fully autonomous car. And now when I talk about autonomous car, I'm talking about being able to run on a highway, if you will. It'll be a while before these vehicles are connected to their environment, connected to other vehicles, connected to traffic signals and things like that. But again, the key is the technology that will support these type vehicles once they become a large part of the VIO. That technology are on the vehicles today and coming into our repair bays. This gives you a sense of that. These are 5 different types of technology that is part of these ADAS systems, and it will be a major part of taking vehicles to autonomous vehicles. Got adaptive cruise control, autonomous emergency brake. You can read them across the bottom. But the key is the amount of growth that we're seeing. All of these are showing great growth, tremendous growth between 2014 and 2020. Talking a little bit about the different types of autonomous cars that we see coming. We kind of break them into 5 different categories, L1 through L5, and you can see when these types of vehicles are actually been on the road. And you got L1 that is when there's autonomy of one primary control function, if you will, whether it be autonomous braking or cruise control. You got L2 partial autonomy, where there's maybe 2 primary control functions, things helping with traffic jams on the highway, adaptive cruise control, lane keep assists. Then you get into L3, which is actually limited self-driving, where you actually have autopilot type functionalities. And you can see those types of vehicles are on the road today even. The Tesla S model is certainly a version of that. And then you get into the vehicles that will be coming farther down the line. The L4, which is a fully self-driving car, but there's still a steering wheel in there for human-driven vehicle. And then an L5, which is a fully self-driving car. And when you look at a forecast, you can see it's a ways before these are going to be a large part of the VIO. These are global annual sales of L4, L5, and then L4 and 5 combined. And more important than the number, about 12 million, the more important is down here. It's going to be a while, 2035, before we reach those 10, 12 million annual sales of these type vehicles. So again, you're going to start seeing them come in another 10 years or so. But the point I want to make for the aftermarket is we need to be ready now. One of the things I like to talk about is whether anybody's heard of George Hotz. As we conclude here, this kind of gives a story, a point to this technology being out there already. Well, George, at 17 years old, he was the guy that hacked into the iPhone. Back when the iPhone came out and you could only use it with AT&T, he hacked in and allowed the iPhone to be used with any carrier. At 20 years old, he's the guy that hacked into the Sony PlayStation 3, giving himself read and write capability to the PlayStation 3. Well, George has been busy. He's now 26, hasn't graduated college yet, but he's developed his own autonomous car in his garage. So the point here is that the technology is there. In fact, George is putting together a company that will have an aftermarket retrofit autonomous vehicle technology package that you can put on your own vehicle. And again, this is autonomous on a highway, not in a city traffic situation. It'll be a while before that can all be connected. But the point being that the technology is there, and that we as an aftermarket face a challenge. And I liken it much back to when we moved from fuel-injected vehicles to carbureted vehicles. A lot of people didn't think the aftermarket could repair that fancy new technology. Well, we're seeing the same thing today. And I think we just need to know that we need to educate the consumer once again that we do have the parts and the technician to service this new technology and these next generation of vehicles. We just need to do it again. So there you have it. Those are the 4 trends. I hope you agree that they all certainly provide challenges, but if we're aware of them and react to them, they certainly provide opportunities for those that are prepared as well. So with that, I know we've only got a few minutes left, but I'll turn it over to Gina for facilitating any Q&A.
Yeah, we have a little bit of time for more questions. If you have a question, please submit them now in your chat feature. This webinar has been recorded and will be posted on the Auto Care Association website at autocare.org/industry-analysis-webinars. And our next webinar is scheduled for Wednesday, December 7th at 2 p.m. Eastern on commercial vehicle trends, and that will be the final webinar of this webinar series. and online registration will be available on the same web page soon. So I have one question for you here, Mark. It says, looking at vehicle mix, isn't the reality that if you combine CUV and traditional sedan, the total category comparison year over year is literally the same? And if so, when the industry refers to truck, does it really make sense to consider a CUV a truck?
Well, I mean, that's always a good question, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but yeah, there is some swing, like I said, from a car to the CUV or SUV body style. So I think what it impacts is, again, the inventory decisions you make. I mean, obviously those vehicles still need repair and everything else, but there are impacts, like I said, as far as the convertible versus the two-door coupe and things like that were built off that car model. So the answer is yes. Certainly from an overall number of vehicles, I shared how the total VIO is continuing to grow. It's not impacting that. But I do think the fact that it's shifting the type of body style, and it could impact the type of parts that will require repair on those type vehicles. You know, if we were talking 15, 20 years ago, it was the big SUVs that everybody was focusing in on when it came to, you know, people doing actually catalogs for big SUVs, you know, making inventory decisions. I think it's the same type of thing happening now with the smaller CUVs and I'm sorry, the CUVs, the crossovers, and the smaller SUVs. So in general, yeah, it is kind of a shift. We track it differently because, again, we track a lot of it for the OEMs, and the different body styles are very important. I just think it's also important for the aftermarket to be aware of it as well.
Okay, thank you. We'll take one last question here. Does the VMT include heavy-duty vehicles? And if so, wouldn't that be a response to economic conditions, not only the price of gas?
No, the VMT, vehicle miles traveled, that I shared is light vehicles only. That does not include the big heavy trucks.
Okay, thanks. Thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. Stay tuned for our last webinar on Wednesday, December 7th, and have a great day.
Thank you. Hello?
I'm still here, but
Oh,
they
okay.
might have hopped off, so
Oh, okay.
you might be free to hop off.
Yeah, I didn't know if they wanted to debrief or anything, but yeah, it looks like.
Yeah, I don't think they generally. Yeah, they don't. I don't think they do that, and it looks like Gina's not even on the audio anymore. So.
Yeah, I see that often.
But no,
Okay.
I think it went really well.
How many did we have?
Total, like the max amount that I saw in the middle was about 131.
Okay, cool.
Which is great.
Yeah.
Because I think she had originally said we were at like 250 yesterday. Now I see this 501. I don't know if they accidentally duplicated the list or what, but I'll get from her what the final registration list was and kind of see what our percentages were.
Yeah, I can't imagine there was 500. So yeah, that must have.
Yeah,
something must have
I would think that seems crazy, but hey, you never know. But okay.
Okay.
Well, great job. Thanks, Mark.
Pretty good. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, talk to you later.
Yep. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.